Chapter 7. Summer. Bright hot days. Hunger still a vital part of my consciousness. Passing relatives in the hallways of the crowd at home and not speaking. Eating in silence at a table where prayers are said. My mother recovering slowly, but now definitely crippled for life. Will I be able to enter school in September? Loneliness. Reading. Job hunting. Vague hopes of going north. But what will become of my mother if I left her in this queer house? And how would I fare in a strange city? Doubt. Fear. My friends are buying long pantsuits that cost from $17 to $20, a sum as huge to me as the Alps. This was my reality in 1924. Word came that a nearby brickyard was hiring, and I went to investigate. I was frail, not weighing 100 pounds. At noon I sneaked into the yard and walked among the aisles of damp, clean-smelling clay, and came to a barrel full of wet bricks, just taken from the machine that shaped them. I caught hold of the handles of the barrel, and was barely able to lift it. It weighed perhaps 4 times as much as I did, if I were only stronger and heavier. Later I asked questions and found that the water boy was missing. I ran to the office and was hired. I walked in the hot sun, lugging a big zinc pail from one laboring gang of black men to another for $1 a day. A man would lift the tin dipper to his lips, take a swallow, rinse out his mouth, spit, and then drink in long, slow gulps as sweat dripped into the dipper. And off again I would go chanting, "Water!" And somebody would yell, "Here, boy!" Deep into wet pits of clay, into sticky ditches, up slippery slopes, I would struggle with the pail. I stuck it out, reeling at times from hunger, pausing to get my breath before clambering up a hill. At the end of the week, the money sank into the endless expenses at home. Later, I got a job in the yard that paid $1.50 a day. That of BlackBoy. I went between the walls of clay and picked up bricks that had cracked open. When my barrel was full, I would wheel it out onto a wooden scaffold and dump it onto a pond. I had but one fear here, a dog. He was owned by the boss of the brickyard, and he haunted the clay aisles, snapping, growling. The dog had been wounded many times, for the black workers were always hurling bricks at it. Whenever I saw the animal, I would take a brick from my load and toss it at him. He would slink away, only to appear again, showing his teeth. Several of the Negroes had been bitten and had been ill. The boss had been asked to leash the dog, but he had refused. One afternoon I was wheeling my barrel toward the pond when something sharp sank into my thigh. I whirled. The dog crouched a few feet away, snarling. I had been bitten. I drove the dog away and opened my trousers. Teeth marks showed deep and red. I did not mind the stinging hurt, but I was afraid of an infection. When I went to the office to report that the boss's dog had bitten me, I was met by a tall blonde white girl. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want to see the boss, ma'am." "For what?" "His dog bit me, ma'am, and I'm afraid I might get an infection." "Where did he bite you?" "On my leg." I lied, shying from telling her where the bite was. "Let's see," she said. "No, ma'am. Can I see the boss?" "He isn't here now," she said, and went back to her typing. I returned to work, stopping occasionally to examine the teeth marks. They were swelling. Later in the afternoon, a tall white man wearing a cool white suit, a Panama hat, and white shoes came toward me. "Is this a nigger?" he asked the black boy as he pointed at me. "Yes, sir," the black boy answered. "Come here, nigger," he called me. I went to him. "They tell me my dog bit you," he said. "Yes, sir." I pulled down my trousers and he looked. He grunted, then laughed. "A dog bite can't hurt a nigger." "It's swelling and it hurts," I said. "If it bothers you, let me know," he said. but I never saw a dog yet that could really hurt a nigger." He turned and walked away, and the black boys gathered to watch his tall form disappear down the aisles of wet bricks. "Son of a bitch! He'll get his someday. Boy, their hearts are hard. Lord, that white man do anything." "Break up that prayer meeting," the white straw boss yelled. The wheelbarrows rolled again. A boy came close to me. "You better see a doctor," he whispered. "I ain't got no money," I said. 2 days passed, and luckily the redness and swelling went away. Summer wore on and the brickyard closed. Again, I was out of work. I heard that caddies were wanted, and I tramped 5 miles to the golf links. I was hired by a florid-faced white man at the rate of 50 cents for 9 holes. I did not know the game, and I lost 3 balls in as many minutes. It seemed that my eyes could not trace the flight of the balls. The man dismissed me. I watched the other boys do their jobs, and within a half an hour I had another golf bag and was following a ball. I made $1. I returned home disgusted, tired, hungry, hating the sight of a golf course. School opened then. Though I had not prepared myself, I enrolled. The school was far across town, and the walking distance alone consumed my breakfast of mush and lard gravy. I attended classes without books for a month, then got a job working mornings and evenings for $3 a week. I grew silent and reserved, as the nature of the world in which I lived became plain and undeniable. The bleakness of the future affected my will to study. Granny had already thrown out hints that it was time for me to be on my own. But what had I learned so far that would help me to make a living? Nothing. I could be a porter, like my father before me, but what else? And the problem of living as a Negro was cold and hard. What was it that made the hate of whites for blacks so steady, seemingly so woven into the texture of things? What kind of life was possible under that hate? How had this hate come to be? Nothing about the problems of Negroes was ever taught in the classrooms at school, and whenever I would raise these questions with the boys, they would either remain silent or turn the subject into a joke. They were vocal about the petty individual wrongs they suffered, but they possessed no desire for a knowledge of the picture as a whole. Then why was I worried about it? Was I really as bad as my uncles and aunts and granny repeatedly said? Why was it considered wrong to ask questions? Was I right when I resisted punishment? It was inconceivable to me that one should surrender to what seemed wrong, and most of the people I had met seemed wrong. Ought one to surrender to authority even if one believed that that authority was wrong? If the answer was yes, then I knew that I would always be wrong because I could never do it. Then how could one live in a world in which one's mind and perceptions meant nothing and authority and tradition meant everything? There were no answers. The 8th grade days flowed in their hungry path, and I grew more conscious of myself. I sat in classes, bored, wondering, dreaming. One long dry afternoon I took out my composition book and told myself that I would write a story. It was sheer idleness that led me to it. What would the story be about? It resolved itself into a plot about a villain who wanted a widow's home, and I called it The Voodoo of Hell's Half Acre. It was crudely atmospheric, emotional, intuitively psychological, and stemmed from pure feeling. I finished it in 3 days and then wondered what to do with it. The local Negro newspaper. That's it. I sailed into the office and shoved my ragged composition book under the nose of the man who called himself the editor. "What is that?" he asked. "A story," I said. "A news story?" "No, fiction." "All right, I'll read it," he said. He pushed my composition book back on his desk and looked at me curiously, sucking at his pipe. "But I want you to read it now," I said. He blinked. I had no idea how newspapers were run. I thought that one took a story to an editor and he sat down then and there and read it and said yes or no. "I'll read this and let you know about it tomorrow," he said. I was disappointed. I had taken time to write it, and he seemed distant and uninterested. "Give me the story," I said, reaching for it. He turned from me, took up the book, and read 10 pages or more. "Won't you come in tomorrow?" he asked. "I'll have it finished then." I honestly relented. "All right," I said. "I'll stop in tomorrow." I left with the conviction that he would not read it. Now, where else could I take it after he turned it down? The next afternoon, en route to my job, I stepped into the newspaper office. "Where's my story?" I asked. "It's in the galleys," he said. "What's that?" I asked. I did not know what galleys were. "It's set up in type," he said. "We're publishing it." "How much money will I get?" I asked, excited. "We can't pay for manuscripts," he said. "But you sell your papers for money," I said with logic. "Yes, but we're young in business," he explained. "But you're asking me to give you my story, but you don't give your papers away," I said. He laughed. "Look, you're just starting. This story will put your name before our readers. Now that's something," he said. "But if the story is good enough to sell to your readers, then you ought to give me some of the money you get from it," I insisted. He laughed again, and I sensed that I was amusing him. "I'm going to offer you something more valuable than money," he said. "I'll give you a chance to learn to write." I was pleased, but I still thought he was taking advantage of me. "When will you publish my story?" "I'm dividing it into 3 installments," he said. "The first installment appears this week. But the main thing is this. Will you get news from me on a space rate basis? I work mornings and evenings for $3 a week," I said. "Oh," he said, "then you better keep that. But what are you doing this summer?" "Nothing." "Then come to see me before you take another job," he said, "and write some more stories." A few days later, my classmates came to me with baffled eyes, holding copies of the Southern Register in their hands. "Did you really write that story?" they asked me. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I wanted to." "Where did you get it from?" "I made it up." "You didn't. You copied it out of a book." "If I had, no one would publish it." "But what are they publishing it for?" "So people can read it." "Who told you to do that?" "Nobody." "Then why did you do it?" "Because I wanted to," I said again. They were convinced that I had not told them the truth. We had never had any instruction in literary matters at school. The literature of the nation or the Negro had never been mentioned. My schoolmates could not understand why anyone would want to write a story, and above all, they could not understand why I had called it The Voodoo of Hell's Half Acre. The mood out of which a story was written was the most alien thing conceivable to them. They looked at me with new eyes, and a distance, a suspiciousness came between us. If I had thought anything in writing the story, I had thought that perhaps it would make me more acceptable to them, and now it was cutting me off from them more completely than ever. At home, the effects were no less disturbing. Granny came into my room early one morning and sat on the edge of my bed. "Richard, what is this you're putting in the papers?" she asked. A story. About what? It's just a story, Granny. But they tell me it's been in there 3 times. It's the same story. It's in 3 parts. But what's it about? She insisted. I hedged, fearful of getting into a religious argument. It's just a story I made up. Then it's a lie, she said. Oh, Christ. You must get out of this house if you take the name of the Lord in vain. Granny, please, I'm sorry, I pleaded. But it's hard to tell you about the story. You see, Granny, everybody knows that the story isn't true, but then why write it? Because people might want to read it. That's the devil's work, she said and left. My mother also was worried. Son, you ought to be more serious, she said. You're growing up now and you won't be able to get jobs if you let people think that you're weak-minded. Suppose the superintendent of schools would ask you to teach here in Jackson and he found out that you had been writing stories. I could not answer her. I'll be all right, Mama. Uncle Tom, though surprised, was highly critical and contemptuous. The story had no point, he said, and whoever heard of a story by the title of The Voodoo of Hell's Half Acre? Aunt Addie said that it was a sin for anyone to use the word hell, and that what was wrong with me was that I had nobody to guide me. She blamed the whole thing upon my upbringing. In the end, I was so angry that I refused to talk about the story. From no quarter, with the exception of the Negro newspaper editor, had there come a single encouraging word. It was rumored that the principal wanted to know why I had used the word hell. I felt that I had committed a crime. Had I been conscious of the full extent to which I was pushing against the current of my environment, I would have been frightened altogether out of my attempts at writing. But my reactions were limited to the attitude of the people about me, and I did not speculate or generalize. I dreamed of going north and writing books, novels. The North symbolized to me all that I had not felt and seen. It had no relation whatever to what actually existed. Yet, by imagining a place where everything was possible, I kept hope alive in me. But where had I got this notion of doing something in the future, of going away from home and accomplishing something that would be recognized by others? I had, of course, read my Horatio Alger stories, my pulp stories, and I knew my get-rich-quick Wallingford series from cover to cover, though I had sense enough not to hope to get rich. Even to my naive imagination, that possibility was too remote. I knew that I lived in a country in which the aspirations of black people were limited, marked off. Yet I felt that I had to go somewhere and do something to redeem my being alive. I was building up in me a dream which the entire educational system of the South had been rigged to stifle. I was feeling that the very thing the state of Mississippi had spent millions of dollars to make sure that I would never feel. I was becoming aware of the thing that the Jim Crow laws had been drafted and passed to keep out of my consciousness. I was acting on impulses that Southern senators in the nation's capital had striven to keep out of Negro life. I was beginning to dream the dreams that the state had said were wrong, that the schools had said were taboo. Had I been articulate about my ultimate aspirations, no doubt someone would have told me what I was bargaining for. But nobody seemed to know, and least of all did I. My classmates felt that I was doing something that was vaguely wrong, but they did not know how to express it. As the outside world grew more meaningful, I became more concerned, tense, and my classmates and my teachers would say, "Why do you ask so many questions?" or "Keep quiet." I was in my 15th year. In terms of schooling, I was far behind the average youth of the nation. But I did not know that. In me was shaping a yearning for a kind of consciousness, a mode of being that the way of life about me had said could not be, must not be, and upon which the penalty of death had been placed. Somewhere in the dead of the southern night, my life had switched onto the wrong track, and without my knowing it, the locomotive of my heart was rushing down a dangerously steep slope, heading for a collision, heedless of the warning red lights that blinked all about me, the sirens and the bells and the screams that filled the air. Chapter 8. Summer again. The old problem of hunting for a job. I told the woman for whom I was working, a Mrs. Bibbs, that I needed an all-day job that would pay me enough money to buy clothes and books for the next school term. She took the matter up with her husband, who was a foreman in a sawmill. "So you want to work in the mill, huh?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He came to me and put his hands under my arms and lifted me from the floor, as though I were a bundle of feathers. "You're too light for our work." "But maybe I could do something there," I said. "That's the problem," he said soberly. "The work's heavy and dangerous." He was silent, and I knew that he considered the matter closed. That was the way things were between whites and blacks in the South. Many of the most important things were never openly said. They were understated and left to seep through to one. I, in turn, said nothing, but I did not leave the room. My standing silent was a way of asking him to reconsider, telling him that I wanted ever so much to try for a job in his mill. "All right. Come to the mill in the morning. I'll see what I can do. But I don't think that you'll like it." I was at the mill at dawn the next morning and saw men lifting huge logs with tackle blocks. There were scores of buzzing steel saws biting into green wood with loud whines. "Watch out!" somebody yelled. I looked around and saw a black man pointing above my head. I glanced up. A log was swinging toward me. I scrambled out of his path. The black man came to my side. "What do you want here, boy?" "Mr. Bibbs, the foreman, told me to look around. I'm looking for a job." The man gazed at me intently. "I wouldn't try for this if I was you. If you knew this game, all right. But this is dangerous stuff for a guy that's green." He held up his right hand, from which 3 fingers were missing. "See?" I nodded and left. Empty days, long days, bright hot days. The sun heated the pavements until they felt like the top of an oven. I spent the morning hunting for jobs, and I read during the afternoons. One morning I was walking toward the center of town and passed the home of a classmate, Ned Greenlee. He was sitting on his porch looking glum. "Hello, Ned. What's new?" "You've heard, haven't you?" "About what?" "My brother Bob." "No, what happened?" Ned began to weep softly. "They killed him," he managed to say. "The white folks?" I asked in a whisper, guessing. He sobbed his answer. "Bob was dead. I had met him only a few times, but I felt that I had known him through his brother. "What happened?" They took him in a car out on the country road. They shot him," Ned whimpered. I had heard that Bob was working at one of the hotels in town. "Why?" They said he was fooling with the white prostitute there in the hotel." Inside of me, my world crashed and my body felt heavy. I stood looking down the quiet, sun-filled street. Bob had been caught by the White Death, the threat of which hung over every male black in the South. I had heard whispered tales of black boys having sex relations with white prostitutes in the hotels in town, but I had never paid any close attention to them. Now those tales came home to me in the form of the death of a man I knew. I did not search for a job that day. I returned home and sat on my porch, too, and stared. What I had heard altered the look of the world, induced in me a temporary paralysis of will and impulse. The penalty of death awaited me if I made a false move, and I wondered if it was worthwhile to make any move at all. The things that influenced my conduct as a Negro did not have to happen to me directly. I needed but to hear of them to feel their full effects in the deepest layers of my consciousness. Indeed, the white brutality that I had not seen was a more effective control of my behavior than that which I knew. The actual experience would have let me see the realistic outlines of what was really happening, but as long as it remained something terrible and yet remote, something whose horror and blood might descend upon me at any moment, I was compelled to give my entire imagination over to it, an act which blocked the springs of thought and feeling in me, creating a sense of distance between me and the world in which I lived. A few days later, I sought out the editor of the local Negro newspaper and found that he could not hire me. I had doubts now about my being able to enter school that fall. The empty days of summer rolled on. Whenever I met my classmates, they would tell me about the jobs they had found, how some of them had left town to work in summer resorts in the North. Why did they not tell me of these jobs? I demanded of them. They said that they simply had not thought of it, and as I heard the words fall from their lips, my sense of isolation became doubly acute. But after all, what would make them think of me in connection with jobs when for years I had encountered them only casually in the classroom? I had had no association with them. The religious home in which I lived, my mush and lard gravy poverty, had cut me off from the normal processes of the lives of black boys my own age. One afternoon, I made a discovery in the home that stunned me. I was talking to my cousin, Maggie, who was a few months younger than I, when Uncle Tom entered the room. He paused, stared at me with silent hostility, then called his daughter. I gave the matter no thought. A few moments later, I rose from my chair, where I had been reading, and was on my way down the hall when I heard Uncle Tom scolding his daughter. I caught a few phrases. "Do you want me to break your neck? Didn't I tell you to stay away from him? That boy's a dangerous fool, I tell you. Then why don't you keep away from him? And make the other children keep away from him. Ask me no questions, but do as I tell you. Keep away from him or I'll skin you." And I could hear my cousin's whimpering replies. My throat grew tight with anger. I wanted to rush into the room and demand an explanation, but I held still. How long had this been going on? I thought back over the time since Uncle Tom and his family had moved into the house, and I was filled with dismay as I recalled that on scarcely any occasion had any of his children ever been alone with me. Be careful now, I told myself. Don't see what isn't there. But no matter how carefully I weighed my memories, I could recall no innocent intimacy, no games, no playing, none of the association that usually exists between young people living in the same house. Then suddenly I was reliving that early morning when I had held Uncle Tom at bay with my razors. Though I must have seemed brutal and desperate to him, I had never thought of myself as being so, and now I was appalled at how I was regarded. It was a flash of insight which revealed to me the true nature of my relations with my family. An insight which altered the entire course of my life. I was now definitely decided upon leaving home, but I would remain until the 9th grade term had ended. There were many days when I spoke to no one in the home except my mother. My life was falling to pieces, and I was acutely aware of it. I was poised for flight, but I was waiting for some event, some word, some act, some circumstance to furnish the impetus. I returned to my job at Mrs. Bibb's and bought my school books. My clothing remained little better than rags. Luckily, the studies in the 9th, my last year at school, were light, and during a part of the term, the teacher turned over the class to my supervision, an honor that helped me emotionally and made me hope faintly. It was even hinted that if I kept my grades high, it would be possible for me to teach in the city school system. During that winter, my brother came home from Chicago. I was glad to see him, though we were strangers, but it was not long before I felt that the affection shown him by the family was far greater than that which I had ever seen from them. Slowly my brother grew openly critical of me, taking his cue from those about him, and it hurt. My loneliness became organic. I felt walled in, and I grew irritable. I associated less and less with my classmates, for their talk was now full of the schools they planned to attend when the term was over. The cold days dragged mechanically, up early into my job, splitting wood, carrying coal, sweeping floors, then off to school and boredom. The school term ended. I was selected as valedictorian of my class and assigned to write a paper to be delivered at one of the public auditoriums. One morning, the principal summoned me to his office. "Well, Richard Wright, here's your speech," he said with smooth bluntness, and shoved a stack of stapled sheets across his desk. "What speech?" I asked as I picked up the papers. "The speech you're going to say the night of graduation." "But, Professor, I've written my speech already." He laughed confidently, indulgently. "Listen, boy, you're going to speak to both white and colored people that night. What can you alone think of saying to them? You have no experience." I burned. "I know that I'm not educated, Professor, but the people are coming to hear the students, and I won't make a speech that you've written." He leaned back in his chair and looked at me in surprise. "You know, we've never had a boy in this school like you before. You've had your way around here. Just how you've managed to do it, I don't know. But listen, take this speech and say it. I know what's best for you. You can't afford to just say anything before those white people that night." He paused and added meaningfully, "The superintendent of schools will be there. You're in a position to make a good impression on him. I've been a principal for more years than you are old, boy. I've seen many a boy and girl graduate from this school, and none of them was too proud to recite a speech I wrote for them. I had to make up my mind quickly. I was faced with a matter of principle. I wanted to graduate, but I did not want to make a public speech that was not my own. "Professor, I'm going to say my own speech that night." He grew angry. "You're just a young, hot-headed fool." He toyed with the pencil and looked up at me. "Suppose you don't graduate." "But I passed my examinations." "Look, mister, I'm the man who says who passes at this school." I was so astonished that my body jerked. I had gone to this school for 2 years, and I had never suspected what kind of man the principal was. It simply had never occurred to me to wonder about him. "Then I don't have to graduate," I said flatly. I turned to leave. "Say you, come here." I turned and faced him. He was smiling at me in a remote, superior sort of way. "You know, I'm glad I talked to you. I was seriously thinking of placing you in the school system teaching. But now I don't think that you're fit." He was tempting me, baiting me. This was the technique that snared black young minds into supporting the Southern way of life. "Look, Professor, I may never get a chance to go to school again, but I like to do things right." "What do you mean?" "I have no money. I'm going to work. Now, this 9th grade diploma isn't going to help me much in life. I'm not bitter about it. It's not your fault. But I'm just not going to do things this way." "Have you talked to anybody about this?" "No, why? Are you sure?" "This is the first I've heard of it, Professor," I said, amazed again. "You haven't talked to any white people about this?" "No, sir." "I just wanted to know," he said. My amazement increased. The man was afraid now for his job. "Professor, you don't understand me." I smiled. "You're just a young, hot fool," he said, confident again. "Wake up, boy. Learn the world you're living in. You're smart, and I know what you're after. I've kept closer track of you than you think. I know your relatives. Now, if you play safe," he smiled and winked, "I'll help you to go to school, to college." "I want to learn, Professor, but there are some things I don't want to know. Goodbye." I went home, hurt but determined. I had been talking to a bought man, and he had tried to buy me. I felt that I had been dealing with something unclean. That night, Griggs, a boy who had gone through many classes with me, came to the house. "Look, Dick, you're throwing away your future here in Jackson," he said. "Go to the principal, talk to him, take his speech and say it. I'm saying the one he wrote, so why can't you? What the hell? What can you lose?" "No." "Why?" "I know only a hell of a little, but my speech is going to reflect that," I said. "Then you're going to be blacklisted for teaching jobs." "Who the hell said I was going to teach?" I asked. "God, but you've got a will," he said. "It's not will. I just don't want to do things that way." He left. 2 days later, Uncle Tom came to me. I knew that the principal had called him in. "I hear that the principal wants you to say a speech which you rejected." "Yes, sir, that's right." "May I read the speech you've written?" "Certainly," I said, giving him my manuscript. "And may I see the one that the principal wrote?" I gave him the principal's speech too. He went to his room and read them. I sat quiet, waiting. He returned. "The principal's speech is a better speech," he said. "I don't doubt it," I replied, "but why did they ask me to write a speech if I can't deliver it?" "Will you let me work on your speech?" he asked. "No, sir." "Now, look, Richard, this is your future." "Uncle Tom, I don't care to discuss this with you." He stared at me, then left. The principal's speech was simpler and clearer than mine, but it did not say anything. Mine was cloudy, but it said what I wanted it to say. What could I do? I had half a mind not to show up at the graduation exercises. I was hating my environment more each day. As soon as school was over, I would get a job, save money, and leave. Griggs, who had accepted a speech written by the principal, came to my house each day, and we went off into the woods to practice orating. Day in and day out, we spoke to the trees, to the creeks, frightening the birds, making the cows in the pasture stare at us in fear. I memorized my speech so thoroughly that I could have recited it in my sleep. The news of my clash with the principal had spread through the class, and the students became openly critical of me. "Richard, you're a fool. You're throwing away every chance you've got. If they had known the kind of fool boy you are, they would never have made you valedictorian." I gritted my teeth and kept my mouth shut, but my rage was mounting. My classmates, motivated by a desire to save me, pestered me until I all but reached the breaking point. In the end, the principal had to caution them to let me alone, for fear I would throw up the sponge and walk out. I had one more problem to settle before I could make my speech. I was the only boy in my class wearing short pants, and I was grimly determined to leave school in long pants. Was I not going to work? Would I not be on my own? When my desire for long pants became known at home, yet another storm shook the house. "You're trying to go too fast," my mother said. "You're nothing but a child," Uncle Tom pronounced. "He's beside himself," Granny said. I served notice that I was making my own decisions from then on. I borrowed money from Mrs. Bibbs, my employer, made a down payment on a pearl gray suit. If I could not pay for it, I would take the damn thing back after graduation. On the night of graduation, I was nervous and tense. I rose and faced the audience, and my speech rolled out. When my voice stopped, there was some applause. I did not care if they liked it or not. I was through. Immediately, even before I left the platform, I tried to shunt all memory of the event from me. A few of my classmates managed to shake my hand as I pushed toward the door, seeking the street. Somebody invited me to a party, and I did not accept. I did not want to see any of them again. I walked home, saying to myself, "The hell with it." With almost 17 years of baffled living behind me, I faced the world in 1925. Chapter 9. My life now depended upon my finding work, and I was so anxious that I accepted the first offer. A job as a porter in a clothing store, selling cheap goods to Negroes on credit. The shop was always crowded with black men and women pawing over cheap suits and dresses, and they paid whatever price the white man asked. The boss, his son, and the clerk treated the Negroes with open contempt, pushing, kicking, or slapping them. No matter how often I witnessed it, I could not get used to it. How can they accept it? I asked myself. I kept on edge, trying to stifle my feelings and never quite succeeding. a prey to guilt and fear because I felt that the boss suspected that I resented what I saw. One morning while I was polishing brass out front, the boss and his son drove up in their car. A frightened black woman sat between them. They got out and half dragged and half kicked the woman into the store. White people passed and looked on without expression. A white policeman watched from the corner, twirling his nightstick, but he made no move. I watched out of the corner of my eyes, but I never slackened the strokes of my chamois upon the brass. After a moment or two, I heard shrill screams coming from the rear room of the store. Later, the woman stumbled out, bleeding, crying, holding her stomach, her clothing torn. When she reached the sidewalk, the policeman met her, grabbed her, accused her of being drunk, called a patrol wagon, and carted her away. When I went to the rear of the store, the boss and his son were washing their hands at the sink. They looked at me and laughed uneasily. The floor was bloody, strewn with wisps of hair and clothing. My face must have reflected my shock, for the boss slapped me reassuringly on the back. "Boy, that's what we do to niggers when they don't pay their bills." His son looked at me and grinned. "Here, have a cigarette." Not knowing what to do, I took it. He lit his and held the match for me. This was a gesture of kindness, indicating that even if they had beaten the black woman, they would not beat me if I knew enough to keep my mouth shut. "Yes, sir," I said. After they had gone, I sat on the edge of a packing box and stared at the bloody floor until the cigarette went out. The store owned a bicycle, which I used in delivering purchases. One day, while returning from the suburbs, my bicycle tire was punctured. I walked along the hot, dusty road, sweating and leading the bicycle by the handlebars. A car slowed at my side. "What's the matter there, boy?" a white man called. I told him that my bicycle was broken and that I was walking back to town. "That's too bad. Hop on the running board." He stopped the car. I clutched hard at my bicycle with one hand and clung to the side of the car with the other. "All set?" "Yes, sir." The car started. It was full of young white men. They were drinking. I watched the flask pass from mouth to mouth. "Want a drink, boy?" one asked. The memory of my 6-year-old drinking came back and filled me with caution, but I laughed, the wind whipping my face. "Oh, no," I said. The words were barely out of my mouth before I felt something hard and cold smash me between the eyes. It was an empty whiskey bottle. I saw stars and fell backwards from the speeding car into the dust of the road, my feet becoming entangled in the steel spokes of the bicycle. The car stopped, and the white men piled out and stood over me. "Nigga, ain't you learned no better sense than that yet?" asked the white man who hit me. "Ain't you learned to say sir to a white man yet?" Dazed, I pulled to my feet. My elbows and legs were bleeding. Fists doubled. The white man advanced, kicking the bicycle out of the way. "Oh, leave the bastard alone. He's got enough." They stood looking at me. I rubbed my shins, trying to stop the flow of blood. No doubt they felt a sort of contemptuous pity, for one asked, "You want to ride to town now, nigger? You reckon you know enough to ride now?" "I want to walk," I said simply. Maybe I sounded funny. They laughed. "Well, walk, you black son of a bitch." Before they got back into the car, they comforted me with, "Nigger, you sure ought to be glad it was us you talked to that way. You're a lucky bastard. 'Cause if you said that to some other white man, you might have been a dead nigger now." I was learning rapidly how to watch white people, to observe their every move, every fleeting expression, how to interpret what was said and what was left unsaid. Late one Saturday night, I made some deliveries in a white neighborhood. I was pedaling my bicycle back to the store as fast as I could when a police car swerving toward me jammed me into the curb. "Get down, nigger, and put up your hands," they ordered. I did. They climbed out of the car, guns drawn, faces set, and advanced slowly. "Keep still." I reached my hands higher. They searched my pockets and packages. They seemed dissatisfied when they could find nothing incriminating. Finally, one of them said, "Boy, tell your boss not to send you out in white neighborhoods at this time of night." "Yes, sir." I rode off, feeling that they might shoot me, feeling that the pavement might disappear. It was like living a dream, the reality of which might change at any moment. Each day in the store, I watched the brutality with growing hate, yet trying to keep my feelings from registering in my face. When the boss looked at me, I would avoid his eyes. Finally, the boss's son cornered me one morning, saying, "Say, nigger, look here." He began. "Yes, sir. What's on your mind?" "Nothing, sir," I said, trying to look amazed, trying to fool him. "Why don't you laugh and talk like the other niggers?" he asked. "Well, sir, there's nothing much to say or smile about," I said, smiling. His face was hard, baffled. I knew that I had not convinced him. He whirled from me and went to the front of the store. He came back a moment later, his face red. He tossed a few green bills at me. "I don't like your looks, nigger. Now get!" he snapped. I picked up the money and did not count it. I grabbed my hat and left. I held a series of petty jobs for short periods, quitting some to work elsewhere, being driven off others because of my attitude, my speech, the look in my eyes. I was no nearer than ever to my goal of saving enough money to leave. At times I doubted if I could ever do it. One jobless morning I went to my old classmate, Griggs, who worked for a Capitol Street jeweler. He was washing the windows of the store when I came upon him. "Do you know where I can find a job?" I asked. He looked at me with scorn. "Yes, I know where you can find a job." "Where?" "But I wonder if you can hold it." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Where's the job?" "Take your time. You know, Dick, I know you. You've been trying to hold a job all summer, and you can't. Why? Because you're impatient. That's your big fault." I said nothing because he was repeating what I had already heard him say. He lit a cigarette and blew out smoke leisurely. "Well," I said, egging him on to speak. "I wish the hell I could talk to you," he said. "I think I know what you want to tell me," I said. He clapped me on the shoulder. His face was full of fear, hate, concern for me. "Do you want to get killed?" he asked me. "Hell no." "Then for God's sake, learn how to live in the South." "What do you mean?" I demanded. Let white people tell me that. Why should you? See? He said triumphantly, pointing his finger at me. There it is. Now it's in your face. You won't let people tell you things. You rush too much. I'm trying to help you, and you won't let me. He paused and looked about. The streets were filled with white people. He spoke to me in a low, full tone. Dick, look, you're black. 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 See? Can't you understand that? Sure, I understand it. You don't act a damn bit like it. He then reeled off an account of my actions on every job I held that summer. How'd you know that? I asked. White people make it their business to watch niggers. And they pass the word around. Now my boss is a Yankee and he tells me things. You're marked already. Could I believe him? Was it true? How could I ever learn this strange world of white people? Then tell me how I must act, I asked humbly. I just want to make enough money to leave. Wait, and I'll tell you. At that moment, a woman and two men stepped from the jewelry store. I moved to one side to let them pass, my mind intent upon Griggs' words. Suddenly, Griggs reached for my arm and jerked me violently, sending me stumbling 3 or 4 feet across the pavement. I whirled. What's the matter with you? I asked. Griggs glared at me and then laughed. I'm teaching you how to get out of the white people's way. I looked at the people who had come out of the store. Yes, they were white, but I had not noticed it. Do you see what I mean? He asked. White people want you out of their way. He pronounced the words slowly so that they would sink into my mind. I know what you mean. Dick, I'm treating you like a brother. You act around white people as if you didn't know that they were white, and they see it. Oh, Christ, I can't be a slave, I said hopelessly. But you got to eat. Yes, I've got to eat. Then start acting like it. He hammered at me, pounding his fist in his palm. When you're in front of white people, think before you act. Think before you speak. Your way of doing things is all right among our people, but not for white people. They won't stand for it. I stared bleakly into the morning sun. I was nearing my 17th birthday, and I was wondering if I would ever be free of this plague. What Griggs was saying was true, but it was simply utterly impossible for me to calculate, to scheme, to act, to plot all the time. I would remember to disassemble for short periods. Then I would forget and act straight and human again. Not with a desire to harm anybody, but merely forgetting the artificial status of race and class. It was the same with whites as with blacks. It was my way with everybody. I sighed, looking at the glittering diamonds in the store window, the rings and the neat rolls of golden watches. I guess you're right, I said at last. I've got to watch myself, break myself. No, he said quickly, feeling guilty now. A white man went into the store and we paused in our talk. You know, Dick, you may think I'm an Uncle Tom, but I'm not. I hate these white people. Hate them with all my heart. But I can't show it. If I did, they'd kill me. He paused and looked around to see if there were any white people within hearing distance. Once I heard an old drunk nigger say, all these white folks dress so fine, their assholes smell just like mine. I laughed uneasily, looking at the white faces that passed me, but Griggs, when he laughed, covered his mouth with his hand and bent at the knees. A gesture which was unconsciously meant to conceal his excessive joy in the presence of whites. "That's how I feel about him," he said proudly after he had finished his spasm of glee. He grew sober. "There's an optical company upstairs, and the boss is a Yankee from Illinois. Now he wants a boy to work all day in summer, mornings and evenings in winter. He wants to break a colored boy into the optical trade. You know algebra and you're just cut out for the work. I'll tell Mr. Crane about you and I'll get in touch with you." "Do you suppose I could see him now?" I asked. "For God's sakes, take your time," he thundered at me. "Maybe that's what's wrong with Negroes. They take too much time." I laughed, but he was disturbed. I thanked him and left. For a week I did not hear from him, and I gave up hope. Then one afternoon, Griggs came to my house. "It looks like you got a job. You're going to have a chance to learn a trade, but remember to keep your head. Remember, you're black. You start tomorrow." "What will I get?" $5 a week to start with. They'll raise you if they like you." My hope soared. Things were not quite so bad. I would have a chance to learn a trade, and I need not give up school. I told him that I would take the job, that I would be humble. "You'll be working for a Yankee, and you ought to get along," he said. The next morning, I was outside the office of the optical company long before it opened. I was reminding myself that I must be polite, must think before I spoke, must think before I acted, must say yes sir, no sir, that I must so conduct myself that white people would not think that I thought I was as good as they. Suddenly, a white man came up to me. "What do you want?" he asked me. "I'm reporting for a job, sir." "Okay, come on." I followed him up a flight of steps, and he unlocked the door of the office. I was a little tense, but the young white man's manner put me at ease, and I sat and held my hat in my hand. A white girl came and began punching the typewriter. Soon another white man, thin and gray, entered and went into the rear room. Finally, a tall, red-faced white man arrived, shot me a quick glance, and sat at his desk. His brisk manner branded him a Yankee. "You're the new boy, eh?" "Yes, sir." "Let me get my mail out of the way and I'll talk with you," he said pleasantly. "Yes, sir." I even pitched my voice to a low plane, trying to rob it of any suggestion or overtone of aggressiveness. Half an hour later, Mr. Crane called me to his desk and questioned me closely about my schooling, about how much mathematics I had. He seemed pleased when I told him that I had 2 years of algebra. "How would you like to learn this trade?" he asked. "I like it fine, sir. I like nothing better." He told me that he wanted to train a Negro boy in the optical trade. He wanted to help him, guide him. I tried to answer in a way that would let him know that I would try to be worthy of what he was doing. He took me to the stenographer and said, "This is Richard. He's going to be with us." He then led me into the rear room of the office, which turned out to be a tiny factory filled with many strange machines smeared with red dust. "Reynolds," he said to a young white man, "this is Richard." "What you saying there, boy?" Reynolds grinned and boomed at me. Mr. Crane took me to the older man. "Peace, this is Richard, who'll work with us." Peace looked at me and nodded. Mr. Crane then held forth to the white men about my duties. He told them to break me in gradually to the workings of the shop, to instruct me in the mechanics of grinding and polishing lenses. They nodded their assent. "Now, boy, let's see how clean you can get this place," Mr. Crane said. "Yes, sir." I swept, mopped, dusted, and soon had the office and the shop clean. In the afternoons, when I had caught up with my work, I ran errands. In an idle moment, I would stand and watch the two white men grinding lenses on the machines. They said nothing to me, and I said nothing to them. The first day passed, the second, the third, a week passed, and I received my $5. A month passed, but I was not learning anything, and nobody had volunteered to help me. One afternoon, I walked up to Reynolds and asked him to tell me about the work. "What are you trying to do, get smart, nigger?" he asked me. "No, sir," I said. I was baffled. Perhaps he just did not want to help me. I went to Peace, reminding him that the boss had said that I was to be given a chance to learn the trade. "Nigger, you think you're white, don't you?" "No, sir." "You're acting mighty like it," he said. "I was only doing what the boss told me to do," I said. Peace shook his fist in my face. "This is a white man's work around here," he said. From then on, they changed toward me. They said good morning no more. When I was just a bit slow in performing some duty, I was called a lazy black son of a bitch. I kept silent, striving to offer no excuse for worsening our relations. But one day Reynolds called me to his machine. "Nigger, you think you'll ever amount to anything?" "I don't know, sir," I answered, turning my head away. "What do niggers think about?" "I don't know, sir," I said, my head still averted. "If I was a nigger, I'd kill myself." I said nothing. I was angry. "You know why?" he asked. I still said nothing. "But I don't reckon niggers mind being niggers," he said suddenly and laughed. I ignored him. Mr. Peace was watching me closely. Then I saw them exchange glances. My job was not leading to what Mr. Crane had said it would. I had been humble, and now I was reaping the wages of humility. "Come here, boy," Peace said. I walked to his bench. "You didn't like what Reynolds just said, did you?" "Oh, it's all right." "You didn't like it. I could see it on your face." I stared at him and backed away. "Did you ever get into any trouble?" "No, sir." "What will you do if you got into trouble?" "I don't know, sir." "Well, watch yourself and don't get into trouble," he warned. I wanted to report these clashes to Mr. Crane, but the thought of what Peace or Reynolds would do to me if they learned that I had snitched stopped me. I worked through the days and tried to hide my resentment under a nervous, cryptic smile. The climax came at noon one summer day. Peace called me to his workbench to get to him. I had to go between two narrow benches and stand with my back against the wall. "Richard, I want to ask you something," Peace began pleasantly, not looking up from his work. "Yes, sir." Reynolds came over and stood blocking the narrow passage between the benches. He folded his arms and stared at me solemnly. I looked from one to the other, sensing trouble. Peace looked up and spoke slowly, so there would be no possibility of my not understanding. "Richard, Reynolds here tells me that you called me Peace," he said. I stiffened. A voice opened up in me. I knew that this was the showdown. He meant that I had failed to call him Mr. Peace. I looked at Reynolds. He was gripping a steel bar in his hand. I opened my mouth to speak, to protest, to assure Peace that I had never called him simply Peace, and that I had never had any intention of doing so, when Reynolds grabbed me by the collar, ramming my head against the wall. "Now be careful, nigger," snarled Reynolds, baring his teeth. "I heard you call him Peace. And if you say you didn't, you're calling me a liar, see?" He waved the steel bar threateningly. If I had said, "No, sir, Mr. Peace, I never called you Peace," I would by inference have been calling Reynolds a liar. And if I had said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Peace, I called you Peace," I would have been pleading guilty to the worst insult that a Negro can offer to a Southern white man. I stood trying to think of a neutral course that would resolve this quickly risen nightmare, but my tongue would not move. "Richard, I asked you a question," Peace said. Anger was creeping into his voice. "I don't remember calling you Peace, Mr. Peace," I said cautiously. "And if I did, I sure didn't mean—" "You black son of a bitch, you called me Peace then," he spat, rising and slapping me till I bent sideways over a bench. Reynolds was on top of me demanding, "Didn't you call him Peace? If you say you didn't, I'll rip your gut string loose with this fucking bar, you black granny dodger. You can't call a white man a liar and get away with it." I wilted. I begged them not to hit me. I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to leave the job. I'll leave right now." They gave me a minute to get out of the factory and warned me not to show up again or tell the boss. Reynolds loosened his hand on my collar and I ducked out of the room. I did not see Mr. Crane or the stenographer in the office. Peace and Reynolds had so timed it that Mr. Crane and the stenographer would be out when they turned on the terror. I went to the street and waited for the boss to return. I saw Griggs wiping glass shelves in the jewelry store, and I beckoned to him. He came out and I told him what had happened. "Then what are you standing there like a fool for?" he demanded. "Won't you ever learn? Get home, they might come down." I walked down Capitol Street feeling that the sidewalk was unreal, that I was unreal, that the people were unreal, yet expecting somebody to demand to know what right I had to be on the streets. My wound went deep. I felt that I had been slapped out of the human race. When I reached home, I did not tell the family what had happened. I merely told them that I had quit, that I was not making enough money, that I was seeking another job. That night, Griggs came to my house. We went for a walk. "You got a goddamn tough break," he said. "Can you say it was my fault?" He shook his head. "Well, what about your goddamn philosophy of meekness?" I asked him bitterly. "These things just happen," he said, shrugging. "They owe me money," I said. "That's what I came about," he said. "Mr. Crane wants you to come in at 10 in the morning. 10 sharp now, mind you, because he'll be there and those guys won't gang up on you again." The next morning at 10, I crept up the stairs and peered into the office of the optical shop to make sure that Mr. Crane was in. He was at his desk. Peace and Reynolds were at their machines in the rear. "Come in, Richard," Mr. Crane said. I pulled off my hat and walked into the office. I stood before him. "Sit down." I sat. He stared at me and shook his head. "Tell me what happened." An impulse to speak rose in me and died with the realization that I was facing a wall that I would never breach. I tried to speak several times and could make no sounds. I grew tense and tears burnt my cheeks. "Now just keep control of yourself," Mr. Crane said. I clenched my fist and managed to talk. "I tried to do my best here." "I believe you. But I want to know what happened. Which one bothered you?" "Both of them." Reynolds came running to the door and I rose. Mr. Crane jumped to his feet. "Get back in there," he told Reynolds. "That nigger's lying. I'll kill him if he lies on me." "Get back in there or get out," Mr. Crane said. Reynolds backed away, keeping his eyes on me. "Go ahead. Tell me what happened." Then again I could not speak. What could I accomplish by telling him? I was black. I lived in the South. I would never learn to operate those machines as long as those two white men in there stood by them. Anger and fear welled in me as I felt what I had missed. I leaned forward and clapped my hands to my face. "No, no, now," Mr. Crane said. "Keep control of yourself. No matter what happens, keep control." I know. There's no use of my saying anything. "Do you want to work here?" he asked me. I looked at the white faces of Peace and Reynolds. I imagined they're waylaying me, killing me. I was remembering what had happened to Ned's brother. "No, sir." "Why?" "I'm scared. They would kill me." Mr. Crane turned and called Peace and Reynolds into the office. "Now tell me which one bothered you. Don't be afraid. Nobody's going to hurt you." I stared ahead of me and did not answer. He waved the men inside. The white stenographer looked at me with wide eyes, and I felt drenched in shame, naked to my soul. The whole of my being felt violated, and I knew that my own fear had helped to violate it. I was breathing hard and struggling to master my feelings. "Can I get my money, sir?" "Just sit a minute and take hold of yourself." I waited and my roused senses grew slowly calm. "I'm awfully sorry about this." I had hoped for a lot from this job. I wanted to go to school, to college. "I know. But what are you going to do now?" My eyes traveled over the office, but I was not seeing. "I'm going away." "What do you mean?" "I'm going to get out of the South." "Maybe that's best. I'm from Illinois. Even for me, it's hard there. I can do just so much." He handed me my money, more than I had earned for the week. I thanked him and rose to leave. He rose. I went into the hallway and he followed me. He reached out his hand. "It's tough for you down there." I barely touched his hand. I walked swiftly down the hall, fighting against crying again. I ran down the steps, then paused and looked back up. He was standing at the head of the stairs, shaking his head. I went into the sunshine and walked home, like a blind man. Chapter 10. For weeks after that, I could not believe in my feelings. My personality was numb, reduced to a lumpish, loose, dissolved state. I was a non-man, something that knew vaguely that it was human, but felt that it was not. As time separated me from the experience, I could feel no hate for the men who had driven me from the job. They did not seem to be individual men, but part of a huge, implacable, elemental design toward which hate was futile. What I did feel was a longing to attack. But how? And because I knew of no way to grapple with this thing, I felt doubly cast out. I went to bed tired and got up tired, though I was having no physical exercise. During the day, I overacted to each event, my banked emotions spilling around it. I refused to talk to anyone about my affairs because I knew that I would only hear a justification of the ways of the white folks, and I did not want to hear it. I lived carrying a huge wound, tender, festering, and I shrank when I came near anything that I thought would touch it. But I had to work because I had to eat. My next job was that of a helper in the drugstore. The night before I reported for work, I fought with myself, telling myself that I had to master this thing, that my life depended upon it. Other black people worked, got along somehow. Then I must get along until I could get my hands on enough money to leave. I would make myself fit in. Others had done it. I would do it. I had to do it. I went to the job apprehensive, resolving to watch my every move. I swept the sidewalk, pausing when a white person was 20 feet away. I mopped the store, cautiously waiting for the white people to move out of my way in their own good time. I cleaned acres of glass shelving, changing my tempo now to work faster, holding every nuance of reality within the focus of my consciousness. Noon came and the store was crowded. People jammed to the counters for food. A white man behind the counter ran up to me and shouted, "A jug of Coca-Cola, quick, boy!" My body jerked taut and I stared at him. He stared at me. "What's wrong with you?" "Nothing," I said. "Well, move, don't stand there gaping." Even if I had tried, I could not have told him what was wrong. My sustained expectation of violence had exhausted me. My preoccupation with curbing my impulses, my speech, my movements, my manner, my expressions had increased my anxiety. I became forgetful, concentrating too much upon trivial tasks. The men began to yell at me, and that made it worse. One day I dropped a jug of orange syrup in the middle of the floor. The boss was furious. He caught my arm and jerked me into the back of the drugstore. His face was livid. I expected him to hit me. I was braced to defend myself. "I'm going to deduct that from your pay, you black bastard." Words had come instead of blows, and I relaxed. "Yes, sir. It was my fault." My tone whipped him to a frenzy. "You goddamn right it was," he yelled louder. "I'm new at this," I mumbled, realizing that I had said the wrong thing, though I had been striving to say the right. "We're only trying you out," he warned me. "Yes, sir, I understand." He stared at me, speechless with rage. Why could I not learn to keep my mouth shut at the right time? I had said just one short sentence too many. My words were innocent enough, but they indicated, it seemed, a consciousness on my part that infuriated white people. Saturday night came, and the boss gave me my money and snapped. Don't come back. You won't do. I knew what was wrong with me, but I could not correct it. The words and actions of white people were baffling signs to me. I was living in a culture and not a civilization, and I could learn how that culture worked only by living with it. Misreading the reactions of whites around me made me say and do the wrong things. In my dealings with whites, I was conscious of the entirety of my relations with them, and they were conscious only of what was happening at a given moment. I had to keep remembering what others took for granted. I had to think out what others felt. I had begun coping with the white world too late. I could not make subservience an automatic part of my behavior. I had to feel and think out each tiny item of racial experience in the light of the whole race problem, and to each item I brought the whole of my life. While standing before a white man, I had to figure out how to perform each act and how to say each word. I could not help it. I could not grin. In the past, I had always said too much. Now I found that it was difficult to say anything at all. I could not react as the world in which I live expected me to. That world was too baffling, too uncertain. I was idle for weeks. The summer waned. Hope for school was now definitely gone. Autumn came, and many of the boys who held jobs returned to school. Jobs were now numerous. I heard that hall boys were needed at one of the hotels, the hotel in which Ned's brother had lost his life. Should I go there? Would I, too, make a fatal slip? But I had to earn money. I applied and was accepted to mop long white tiled hallways that stretched around the entire perimeter of the office floors of the building. I reported each night at 10, got a huge pail of water, a bushel of soap flakes, and with a gang of moppers, I worked. All the boys were Negroes, and I was happy. At least I could talk, joke, laugh, sing, say what I pleased. I began to marvel at how smoothly the black boys acted out the roles that the Wright race had mapped out for them. Most of them were not conscious of living a special, separate, stunted way of life. Yet I knew that in some period of their growing up, a period that they had no doubt forgotten, there had been developed in them a delicate, sensitive, controlling mechanism that shut off their minds and emotions from all that the white race had said was taboo. Although they lived in America, where in theory there existed equality of opportunity, they knew unerringly what to aspire to and what not to aspire to. Had a black boy announced that he aspired to be a writer, he would have been unhesitatingly called crazy by his pals. Or had a black boy spoken of yearning to get a seat on the New York Stock Exchange, his friends in the boy's own interest would have reported his odd ambition to the white boss. There was a pale yellow boy who had gonorrhea and was proud of it. "Say," he asked me one night, "you ever have the clap?" "God, no. Why do you ask?" "I got it." "I thought you could tell me something to use." "Haven't you been to a doctor?" I asked. "Oh, hell, them doctors ain't no good." "Don't be foolish." "What's the matter with you?" he demanded of me. "You talk like I should be ashamed of the clap." "I would," I said. "Hell, you ain't a man unless you had done it 3 times. "Don't brag about it," I said. "'Tain't nothing worse than a bad cold," he said. But I noticed that when he urinated, he would grab hold of a steam pipe, a door jamb, or a windowsill and strain with tear-filled eyes and a tortured face, as though he were attempting to lift the hotel from its foundations. I laughed to cover my disgust. When I was through mopping, I would watch the never-ending crap games that went on in the lockers, but I could never become interested enough to participate. Gambling had never appealed to me. I could not conceive of any game holding more risk than the life I was living. Curses and sex stories sounded around the clock, and blue smoke choked the air. I would sit listening for hours, wondering how on earth they could laugh so freely, trying to grasp the miracle that gave their debased lives the semblance of a human existence. Several Negro girls were employed as maids in the hotel, some of whom I knew. One night, when I was about to go home, I saw a girl who lived in my direction, and I fell in beside her to walk part of the distance together. As we passed the white night watchman, he slapped her playfully on her buttocks. I turned around, amazed. The girl twisted out of his reach, tossed her head saucily, and went down the hallway. I had not moved from my tracks. "Nigger, you look like you don't like what I did," he said. I could not move or speak. My immobility must have seemed a challenge to him, for he pulled his gun. "Don't you like it, nigger?" "Yes, sir," I whispered with a dry throat. "Well, talk like it then, God damn it." "Oh, yes, sir," I said with as much heartiness as I could muster. I walked down the hall, knowing that the gun was pointed at me, but afraid to look back. When I was out of the door, my throat felt as though it were swelling and bursting with fire. The girl was waiting for me. I walked past her. She caught up with me. "God, how could you let him do that?" I exploded. "It don't matter. They do that all the time," she said. "I wanted to do something," I said. "You would have been a fool if you had," she said. "But how must you feel?" "They never get any further with us than that, if we don't want them to," she said dryly. "Yes, I would have been a fool," I said, but she did not catch the point. I was afraid to go to work the following night. What would the watchman think? Would he decide to teach me a lesson? I walked slowly through the door, wondering if he would continue his threat. His eyes looked at and through me. Evidently, he considered the matter closed, or else he had so many experiences of that kind that he had already forgotten it. Out of my salary, I had begun to save a few dollars, for my determination to leave had not lessened, but I found the saving exasperatingly slow. I pondered continuously ways of making money, and the only ways that I could think of involved transgressions of the law. No, I must not do that, I told myself. To go to jail in the South would mean the end, and there was the possibility that if I were ever caught, I would never reach jail. This was the first time in my life that I had ever consciously entertained the idea of violating the laws of the land. I had felt that my intelligence and industry could cope with all situations, and until that time, I had never stolen a penny from anyone. Even hunger had never driven me to appropriate what was not my own. The mere idea of stealing had been repugnant. I had not been honest from deliberate motives, but being dishonest had simply never occurred to me. Yet, all about me, Negroes were stealing. More than once, I had been called a dumb nigger by black boys who discovered that I had not availed myself of a chance to snatch some pretty piece of white property that had been carelessly left within my reach. "How in the hell are you going to get ahead?" I had been asked when I had said that one ought not steal. I knew that the boys in the hotel filched whatever they could. I knew that Griggs, my friend who worked in the Capitol Street jewelry store, was stealing regularly and successfully. I knew that a black neighbor of mine was stealing bags of grain from a wholesale house where he worked. though he was a staunch deacon in his church and prayed and sang on Sundays. I knew that the black girls who worked in white homes stole food daily to supplement their scanty wages, and I knew that the very nature of black and white relations bred this constant thievery. No Negroes in my environment had ever thought of organizing, no matter in how orderly a fashion, and petitioning their white employers for higher wages. The very thought would have been terrifying to them, and they knew that the whites would have retaliated with swift brutality. So, pretending to conform to the laws of the whites, grinning, bowing, they let their fingers stick to what they could touch, and the whites seemed to like it. But I, who stole nothing, who wanted to look them straight in the face, who wanted to talk and act like a man, inspired fear in them. The Southern whites would rather have had Negroes who stole work for them than Negroes who knew, however dimly, the worth of their own humanity. Hence, whites placed a premium upon black deceit. They encouraged irresponsibility, and their rewards were bestowed upon us blacks in the degree that we could make them feel safe and superior. My objections to stealing were not moral. I did not approve of it because I knew that in the long run it was futile, that it was not an effective way to alter one's relationship to one's environment. Then how could I change my relationship to my environment? Almost my entire salary went to feed the eternally hungry stomachs at home. If I saved $1 a week, it would take me 2 years to amass $100. The amount which, for some reason, I had decided was necessary to stake me in a strange city. And God knows anything could happen to me in 2 years. I did not know when I would be thrown into a situation where I would say the wrong word to the wrong white man and find myself in trouble. And above all, I wanted to avoid trouble, for I feared that if I clashed with whites, I would lose control of my emotions and spill out words, and that would be my sentence of death. Time was not on my side, and I had to make some move. Often, when perplexed, I longed to be like the smiling, lazy, forgetful black boys in the noisy hotel locker rooms, with no torrential conflicts to resolve. Many times I grew weary of the secret burden I carried and longed to cast it down, either in action or in resignation. But I was not made to be a resigned man, and I had only a limited choice of actions, and I was afraid of all of them. A new anxiety was created in me by my desire to leave quickly. I had now seen at close quarters the haughty white men who made the laws. I had seen how they acted, how they regarded black people, how they regarded me, and I no longer felt bound by the laws which white and black were supposed to obey in common. I was outside those laws. The white people had told me so. Now, when I thought of ways to escape from my environment, I no longer felt the inner restraint that would have made stealing impossible, and this new freedom made me lonely and afraid. My feelings became divided. In spite of myself, I would dream of a locked cupboard in a nearby neighbor's house where a gun was kept. If I stole it, how much would it bring? When the yearning to leave would become strong in me, I could not keep out of my mind the image of a storehouse at a nearby Negro college that held huge cans of preserved fruits. Yet fear kept me from making any move. The idea of stealing floated tentatively in me. My inability to adjust myself to the white world had already shattered a part of the structure of my personality and had broken down the inner barriers to crime. The only thing that now stood in the way was lack of immediate opportunity, a final push of circumstance. And that came. I was promoted to bellboy, which meant a small increase in income, but I soon learned that the substantial money came from bootlegging liquor to the white prostitutes in the hotel. The other bellboys were taking these risks, and I fell in. I learned how to walk past a white policeman with contraband upon my hip, sauntering, whistling like a nigger ought to whistle when he is innocent. The extra dollars were coming in, but slowly. How could I get my hands on more money before I was caught and sent to jail for some trivial misdemeanor? If I were going to violate the law, then I ought to get something out of it. My larcenous aims were modest. $100 would give me, temporarily, more freedom of movement than I had ever known in my life. I watched and waited, living with the thought. While waiting for my chance to grab and run, I grew used to seeing the white prostitutes naked upon their beds, sitting nude about their rooms, and I learned new modes of behavior, new rules in how to live the Jim Crow life. It was presumed that we black boys took their nakedness for granted, that it startled us no more than a blue vase or a red rug. Our presence awoke in them no sense of shame whatever, for we blacks were not considered human anyway. If they were alone, I would steal sidelong glances at them, but if they were receiving men, not a flicker of my eyelids would show. A huge, snowy-skinned blonde took a room on my floor. One night she rang for service, and I went to wait upon her. She was in bed with a thick-set man. Both were nude and uncovered. She said that she wanted some liquor and slid out of the bed and waddled across the floor to get her money from the dresser drawer. Without realizing it, I watched her. "Nigger, what in the hell are you looking at?" the white man asked, raising himself upon his elbows. "Nothing, sir," I answered, looking suddenly miles deep into the blank wall of the room. "Keep your eyes where they belong if you want to be healthy." "Yes, sir." I would have continued at the hotel until I had left, had not a shortcut presented itself. One of the boys at the hotel whispered to me one night that the only local Negro movie house wanted a boy to take tickets at the door. "You ain't never been in jail, is you?" he asked me. "Not yet," I answered. "Then you can get the job," he said. "I take it, but I done 6 months and they know me." "What's the catch?" "The girl who sells tickets is using the system," he explained. "If you get the job, you can make some good gravy." If I stole, I would have a chance to head northward quickly. If I remained barely honest, piddling with pints of bootleg liquor, I merely prolonged my stay, increasing my chances of being caught, exposed myself to the possibility of saying the wrong word or doing the wrong thing and paying a penalty that I dared not think of. The temptation to venture into crime was too strong, and I decided to work quickly, taking whatever was in sight, amass a wad of money, and flee. I knew that the others had tried it before me and had failed, but I was hoping to be lucky. My chances for getting the job were good. I had no past record of stealing or violating the law. When I presented myself to the Jewish proprietor of the movie house, I was immediately accepted. The next day, I reported for duty and began taking tickets. The boss now warned me. "Now look, I'll be honest with you if you'll be honest with me. I don't know who's honest around this joint and who isn't, but if you are honest, then the rest are bound to be. All tickets will pass through your hands. There can be no stealing unless you steal." I gave him a pledge of my honesty, feeling absolutely no qualms about what I intended to do. He was white, and I could never do to him what he and his kind had done to me. Therefore, I reasoned, stealing was not a violation of my ethics, but of his. I felt that things were rigged in his favor, and any action I took to circumvent his scheme of life was justified. Yet I had not convinced myself. During the first afternoon, the Negro girl in the ticket office watched me closely, and I knew that she was sizing me up, trying to determine when it would be safe to break me into her grasp. I waited, leaving it to her to make the first move. I was supposed to drop each ticket that I took from a customer into a metal receptacle. Occasionally, the boss would go to the ticket window and look at the serial number on the roll of unsold tickets, and then compare that number with the number on the last ticket I had dropped into the receptacle. The boss continued his watchfulness for a few days, then began to observe me from across the street. Finally, he absented himself for long intervals. A tension as high as that I had known when the white men had driven me from the job at the optician's returned to live in me. But I had learned to master a great deal of tension now. I had developed, slowly and painfully, a capacity to contain it within myself without betraying it in any way. Had this not been true, the mere thought of stealing, the risk involved, the inner distress would have so upset me that I would have been in no state of mind to calculate coldly, would have made me so panicky that I would have been afraid to steal at all. But my inner resistance had been blasted. I felt that I had been emotionally cast out of the world, had been made to live outside the normal processes of life, had been conditioned and feeling against something daily, had become accustomed to living on the side of those who watched and waited. While I was eating supper in a nearby cafe, one night a strange Negro man walked in and sat beside me. "Hello, Richard." "Hello," I said. "I don't think I know you." "But I know you," he said, smiling. Was he one of his boss's spies? "How do you know me?" "I'm Tell's friend," he said, naming the girl who sold the tickets at the movie. I looked at him searchingly. Was he telling me the truth, or was he trying to trap me for the boss? I was already thinking and feeling like a criminal, distrusting everybody. "We start tonight," he said. "What?" I asked, still not admitting that I knew what he was talking about. "Don't be scared. The boss trusts you. He's going to see some friends. Somebody's watching him, and if he starts back to the movie, they'll phone us." I could not eat my food. It lay cold upon the plate, and sweat ran down from my armpits. "It'll work this way," he explained in a low, smooth tone. "A guy come to you and ask for a match. You give him 5 tickets that you'll hold out of the box. See? We'll give you the signal when to start holding out. The guy give the tickets to Tell. She'll resell them at once when the crowd is buying at the rush hour. You get it?" I did not answer. I knew that if I were caught, I would go to the chain gang. But was not my life already a kind of chain gang? What really did I have to lose? "Are you with us?" he asked. I still did not answer. He rose and clapped me on the shoulder and left. I trembled as I went back to the theater. Anything might happen, but I was used to that. Had I not felt that same sensation when I lay on the ground and the white men towered over me, telling me that I was a lucky nigger? Had I not felt it when I walked home from the optical company that morning with my job gone? Had I not felt it when I walked down the hallway of the hotel with the night watchman pointing a gun at my back? Had I not felt it all 1,000,000 times before? I took the tickets with sweaty fingers. I waited. I was gambling, freedom, or the chain gang. There were times when I felt that I could not breathe. I looked up and down the street. The boss was not in sight. Was this a trap? If it were, I would disgrace my family. Would not all of them say that my attitude had been leading to this all along? Would they not rake up the past and find clues that had led to my fate? The man I had met in the cafe came through the door and put a ticket in my hand. "There's a crowd at the box office," he whispered. "Save 10, not 5. Start with this one." Well, here goes, I thought. He gave me the ticket and sat looking at the moving shadows upon the screen. I held on to the ticket and my body grew tense, hot as fire, but I was used to that too. Time crawled through the cells of my brain. My muscles ached. I discovered that crime means suffering. The crowd came in and gave me more tickets. I kept 10 of them tucked into my moist palm. No sooner had the crowd thinned than a black boy with a cigarette jutting from his mouth came up to me. "Got a match?" With a slow movement, I gave him the tickets. He went out, and I kept the door cracked and watched. He went to the ticket office and laid down a coin, and I saw him slip the tickets to the girl. Yes, the boy was honest. The girl shot me a quick smile, and I went back inside. A few moments later, the same tickets were handed to me by other customers. We worked it for a week, and after the money was split 4 ways, I had $50. Freedom was almost within my grasp. Would I risk any more? I dropped a hint to tell his friend that maybe I would quit. It was a casual hint to test him out. He grew violently angry, and I quickly consented to stay, fearing that someone might turn me in for revenge, or to get me out of the way, so that another and more pliable boy could have my place. I was dealing with cagey people, and I would be cagey. I went through another week. Late one night I resolved to make that week the last. The gun in the neighbor's house came to my mind, and the cans of fruit preserves in the storehouse of the college. If I stole them and sold them, I would have enough to tide me over in Memphis until I can get a job, work, save, and go north. I crept from bed and found the neighbor's house empty. I looked about, all was quiet. My heart beat so fast that it ached. I forced a window with a screwdriver and entered and took the gun. I slipped it in my shirt and returned home. When I took it out to look at it, it was wet with sweat. I pawned it under an assumed name. The following night I rounded up 2 boys whom I knew to be ready for adventure. We broke into the college storehouse and lugged out cans of fruit preserves and sold them to restaurants. Meanwhile, I bought clothes, shoes, a cardboard suitcase, all of which I hid at home. Saturday night came and I sent word to the boss that I was sick. Uncle Tom was upstairs. Granny and Aunt Addie were at church. My brother was sleeping. My mother sat in her rocking chair, humming to herself. I packed my suitcase and went to her. "Mama, I'm going away," I whispered. "Oh, no," she protested. "I've got to, Mama. I can't live this way." "You're not running away from something you've done." "I'll send for you, Mama. I'll be all right." "Take care of yourself and send for me quickly. I'm not happy here," she said. "I'm sorry for all these long years, Mama, but I could not have helped it." I kissed her and she cried. "Be quiet, Mama. I'm all right." I went out the back way and walked a quarter of a mile to the railroad tracks. It began to rain as I tramped down the cross ties toward town. I reached the station, soaked to the skin. I bought my ticket, then went hurriedly to the corner of the block in which the movie house stood. Yes, the boss was there, taking the tickets himself. I returned to the station and waited for my train, my eyes watching the crowd. And half an hour later, I was sitting in a Jim Crow coach, speeding northward, making the first lap of my journey to a land where I could live with a little less fear. Slowly, the burden I had carried for many months lifted somewhat. My cheeks itched, and when I scratched them, I found tears. In that moment, I understood the pain that accompanied crime, and I hoped that I would never have to feel it again. I never did feel it again, for I never stole again, and what kept me from it was the knowledge that, for me, crime carried its own punishment. Well, it's my life, I told myself. I'll see now what I can make of it. End of chapter 10.